Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy Bolduc, and my guest today is Andrew Lewin. Lewin? Oh my God.
Lewin.
Lewin. Thank you. Yeah, I remembered it and I was like, is there another syllable? Anyway, Andrew Lewin, and Andrew is a marine biologist, super duper smart. He's been studying the ocean for a minute.
A little bit.
A minute. And he also has not one but two podcasts. I found out today. I've been listening to his podcast, and I listened to his podcast today, his newest episode, and he said he is also co-host. So he is a host of How to Protect the Ocean, which has a crap ton of episodes. You're like 1,800 episodes
1800. Yeah, over 1800.
because
Yeah.
he records every day. You guys, if you need to know anything about the ocean, you check out How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Um, and he is also co-host of the podcast Beyond Jaws.
That's right. There's a lot going on in the ocean. You got to talk about it.
Yes. Andrew, thank you so much for coming and hanging out and talking to us about, taking care of the ocean, protecting
You,
the ocean.
you bet. Thanks for having me, Amy. I'm
It
super
is
excited for this.
It is a conversation that I have not yet had.
Hmm.
I think I was telling you, I talked to my friend Alexa about it a little bit because she grew up around the ocean. And so it's really important to her. But this is like, this is an important conversation.
Yes.
So thank you so much for helping out with this. And so I think I kind of want to start with how you got here.
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
think that's where I'm like, let's start at the beginning.
Let's just start at the beginning. Well, I was born in 1970. No, I'm just kidding. No, honestly, since I've been young, I've loved the ocean. I didn't grow up around the ocean, but I used to watch it on TV. And so I grew up. I was a 70s baby. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and so the Jacques Cousteau, documentaries that would happen. Shark Week started, when I was young, and so I would watch those, and I would just like gobble it up, seeing coral reefs, seeing sharks, seeing dolphins, seeing whales, and so forth. And it was great. Now, back then, we didn't have the internet, so I'd go to my local library, try and find as much information as possible. A lot of the information was like picture books, not like children picture books, but like these
Right.
beautiful pictures that scuba divers and underwater photographers would take, and they would, display them in there. But you didn't have a lot of information, so I was always thirsty for information around the ocean. Even when I was in school, like I remember grade 11 biology, they were like, "Oh, you got to do something in biology like a project, but it's got to be on human anatomy or something." And I was like, "Well, actually, can I do it on dolphins?" And they're like, "Okay, Andrew, like you can do it. Like
Fine,
we'll do
fine.
an exception." And I loved it. I gobbled it up. And so I went to school. I went to university for marine biology locally here in Ontario, which is kind of weird, but we actually had a really great marine biology program, still do, but it's marine and freshwater biology. And so I was able to get a degree in there. And then I worked in a bunch of different places. I worked in the rivers or in and around Toronto for my first job for the first 6 months. And then I waited for another 6 months before I found a job. It's very difficult to find a job. And I got a job in the Gulf of Mexico, just outside of Louisiana. We were situated. And I lived on a boat for like 8 months. And it was wonderful. It really kind of cut my teeth, let's just say, living on a boat
Big time.
and taking like different instruments. We had, we would have, it was one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. We had people come on the boat from all over the world, the different researchers from the U.S., from China, from Europe, from all over. Navy SEALs were coming on the boat to check for optics. It was really fun. It was a really great experience, and living on the ocean for the first time was really fun as well. I really got the urge when I saw that research to do research, so I went back to Canada to do my master's 8 months later. 2 years later, I got my master's. And then I just kind of worked. We came back to Ontario to, for family reasons. I had, my fiance at the time, now my wife, and we were like, let's make this decision. It was a tough decision to make, but it was a decision that we made because both of our parents were here. We wanted our kids to grow up around aunts, uncles, grandparents, and so forth. And so that was a decision we make, and I would just kind of figure it out from there. And I still had this incessant need to become a marine biologist, to be a marine biologist, whether it was freshwater or anything that had to do with water, I was doing. So I did private consulting. I worked for nonprofit organizations. I worked for the federal government. And during that time, I witnessed one. I mean, we all witnessed it at some point, but I witnessed one of the worst oil spills in the Gulf of Mexico, probably the worst in the Gulf of Mexico, but in the world in about 2010, 2011. My memory kind of deceiving me right now. and I started to see this deep water horizon BP oil spill, and it just as it was developing, you saw so much attention towards it. Like every day, people were watching. You probably remember it, Amy. Like people were watching it, people were talking about. But one thing that I noticed is that marine biologists, conservationists were going to the Gulf of Mexico. And CNN and different other news agencies were actually like not I don't know if they were hiring them, but they were using their content. So they'd have like a Twitter feed, and they would put up videos on Twitter when everybody liked Twitter back then, and they would like talk about it. They would show videos, and they would see the tar balls, and Dr. Carl Safina, who's like a hero of mine, rented a plane and went above, got permission to go above the actual spill to see what it was like. And we learned about dispersants and how, they don't actually clean up oil spills. They just make them sink, and you realize that the bad part of that. But when I saw people talking about it, being on TV or being on Twitter and having the special status, I was like, ooh, this is really cool. This is something that I want to do. And so I was like, okay, how do I do it? And back then in, 2009, 2010, 2011, blogs were huge. There were a few really great blogs, Deep Sea News, Southern Fried Science, that are still around today, that were showing a lot of like science. They were really showing science. I want to show more conservation.
Mhm.
These were great, but I wanted to be like, I want to do my own stuff. I always like to do it myself. This is really bad of me, but I like if I just see a little bit of a hole, like a little bit of room for me, I move in. So I started blogging. I was like, I was going to put up a page every day, like a story every day. Well, I realized that's a lot of work to do every day. And I'm not a great writer, and I don't like writing. So I was like, okay, maybe this isn't for me. Then I got into a friend of mine was like, look, here's this guy. It was actually Mixergy, which is like an entrepreneurial site that had a video cast like on YouTube. And my buddy that I used to play high school football with, we were connected. He's like, how about you do something like this? And so I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I was like, well, I don't want to watch it just on YouTube because I go out for dog walks all the time. We talk about dogs. I always talk about dogs, and I want to listen to it, but I can't listen to YouTube on my phone. And I looked on the site, and it's like, oh, we have a podcast. I didn't even know what a podcast was at that point. I think I may have learned like listen to like a Joe Rogan podcast like back in the day kind of thing when he first started out. And I was like, oh, that's a podcast. And it didn't sound great when he first started. I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's not. But this guy had like the microphone, he had everything. So I started listening to it, and I was like, oh, this is really great. I can walk the dog, takes me about an hour. I can listen to a podcast or two. And then I was like, I wonder if there's any ocean ones. And there weren't any ocean ones. Well, there were, but they hadn't published in a while. They were very
Right.
inconsistent, and they were great episodes, but it wasn't exactly what I want to do. And I was like, well, if there's a little room
And
for
you're
me, I'm
like,
going to
can I
move
get,
in.
I need a fix every day.
I need to know more. And so I started to like think, okay, how do I start a podcast? I got into all that. It was a lot more difficult than it is today to me. And I ended up going like a weird roundabout way in the way I did things. But they eventually, like, I started recording. I started telling my friends and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, do you want to be on this podcast? We'll do this interview. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. I did get into YouTube a little bit beforehand, um, before I get too far myself. So I did YouTube, but the editing was too long. It didn't want to take like 2 hours just to edit. I had toddlers back then. It was just taking too long. And I just had a job. And so I started to get into podcasting. And once I started recording and I finally launched after a year, uh, I was like, this is amazing. I was doing once a week. And then after about 12 episodes, I'm like, no, I bought
I'm
a
all
proper
in.
microphone. I am all in. I had that Yeti back there. See, I'm not sure if you can see behind me over my left shoulder. I had that Yeti, and this room echoes quite a bit. And so you had to be careful. I didn't know quite how to use it at that point. I should tell you, I'm a guy who like throws stuff on the wall and just see what sticks, and so I just do it quickly and I just do it. So it may not be the best right off the bat, but I'll get better if I really like it. So once I started to understand it more, I got a proper mic. This is actually my third mic I've ever used. I got an SM7B before, and I just went 5 days a week, and I was like, this is amazing. I got a friend to help me, a guy that I met who's like, I'll help you at the same time as I decided to go 5 days a week, Nathan Johnson. And we just started going, and he would write because he wanted to write. I didn't want to write. So he wrote the show notes. And then after a while, we did like on a Friday, we did a Ocean Talk Friday where he would take like 3 or 4 articles and we would talk about it.
Nice.
And I was just like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like, this is like a variety show kind of thing. And the whole idea, is these grand podcaster ideas you have. I'm going to monetize all these different segments and we're going to do that. I made no money. I didn't monetize it. And it was just something fun that we did. And then just like things evolve and I switched up the frequencies. And at one point I went back to 3 days a week. And then depending on, just what was going on in my life and different jobs and different commitments and things like that. And then I went, I didn't have a job for a while. And I was like, you know what? If I don't have a job, like this is my side hustle, let's make this in full time. So I decided to go 7 days a week. And the reason I did that, I know you're going to say that's insane. That's totally insane. But the reason I did it in my head, I was thinking, look, I do about 3 different stories per episode. And I was doing that 3 days a week. So 9 stories per week. But the problem was is exactly when Apple Podcasts started to come out with better analytics, so you can see your retention
Hmm.
over the episode. So you can see when people stop listening and
Hmm.
like when the majority of people stop listening. And so my retention was at like 50 to 60%, which is okay. But I was like, but the problem, I was like, that last episode's
They're
not
not
getting, or
listening to
that
the
last
last
story is not
story. Yep.
right. And so I was like, I wonder if, and it was kind of like people were talking about 20 minutes is the ideal length. And I was like, well, people are listening a little longer. And I was like, how do I fix this? And I was like, well, what if I just did like broke up the stories into each episode? I'm not going to do 9. I'm actually going to do less,
Hmm.
but I'm going to publish it every day,
Hmm.
which it's less talking but more show notes, more publishing, more sharing, more that. And I'm a one person show at this time. Nathan got a great job. So he had to stop. And so I was like, okay, let's just see. And I decided to do it and it was fun and it grew and it grew and it grew. People were listening consistently. The interesting thing is like, you would think that you post more, you get more downloads and you do because you're posting more, but it doesn't mean your show is growing in listeners. So I
Hmm.
would get the same like 800, 900 downloads per day because it was the same people listening over and or mostly the same people listening over and over
A
and over again.
day.
Yeah, like well, because it was a show, so I was getting like per episode, so it was basically like a day. And then eventually I went back down to 3 because I've got a full-time job, and I was like, I'm out of money. I can't do this. I wasn't monetizing,
Right.
it wasn't
Yep.
working out the way I wanted it to. And then you just have to kind of do your thing. So I kept to one story, 20-minute episodes solo. Interviews are longer, and then I've continued with 3 days a week since. But it's been a journey. It's been fun. Like I enjoy it. Like I get super pumped with doing it
Still.
still to this day.
Still. And
To this day.
what year did you start, Andrew?
20 I launched in 2015. I started recording in 20. So this has been 10 years
10
as of
years.
June. Yeah, yeah. So it's crazy. It's nuts.
10 years. That's a lot of you're like making up for growing up not around the world.
Well, here's my thought process. Like my thought process going back to like my childhood was I was always looking for information. I was dying for information. And my library was not specializing in oceans because we weren't around an ocean. I had a lot of books on Great Lakes and I read those, but I was really interested in oceans. So I decided like in this world where you have so much information available. And I talk to people all the time and they're asking me the same questions over and over and over again. Right before I started blogging too, as the deep sea horizon happened, I'd have family and friends ask like, what's going on with the ocean? Is climate change a thing? Like, should we be worried about this? Like, what's going on?
Yes,
I
we
heard it's fake and I heard it's this and that. And I'm like, no, like, how do you not know about this? Like how? But of course, like I'm listening to myself and I'm like, well, Andrew, you've studied this for the last
right.
10 years. Why are you surprised that nobody else knows when there's
People
sports
that
to
aren't
worry
studying,
about?
why would they know? Yeah.
Yeah, because they're involved in their own thing. There's like sports. There's we listen to probably
Have you
gossip
told
more than
them?
educational. Yeah, like the Kardashians were big back then, and people were listening to that, and I'm like, why are they listening to that when they don't know about this? But that's what was in front of them. That was entertaining, and it's easy. One of the comments I got when I did my YouTube channel, I was working out at a gym. It was a CrossFit gym, so we went out to dinner one time as a group, and the owner was like, Andrew, I've been watching your videos, but I had to stop. I love the videos, but I had to stop. I'm like, oh, curious. No, like I don't take any offense. Why'd you stop? It was too depressing. I'm like, interesting. Because I was talking about the issues all the time. When you talk about conservation, you got to talk about the issues. And it's doom and gloom sometimes. And so I use that in the podcast journey to say, okay, like, yes, there's going to be times where I have to talk about the crappiness that's happening in the ocean. You have to talk about that. But
Sure.
I should also talk about the optimistic things that are happening in the ocean. And those are the people that I meet, at conferences and through my work and all that kind of stuff, and the projects that they work on. I'm like, you guys need to hear these people.
Yep.
You need to hear all this, like the people are passionate. There's this negative stereotype around scientists, and it's been growing ever since like the early 2000s, where we're this elite group that stick our nose up to everybody and look down on everybody because we think we know more.
Well,
And
where
that's
yeah, the other people are like sinners, basically.
right, right. Everybody's doing something bad, and
Huh.
but like the way I see it is like, no, we actually are very passionate people. We don't get paid that much. Everybody's like, oh, you're getting paid by, the people who want climate change to be reduced and all this kind of stuff. I wish that was the case.
Because those
We're
people
not
have
getting,
lots of money.
yeah, exactly. It's actually the opposite. The oil companies and the fossil fuel companies have been, and it's been proven that they pay these institutes and so forth, like quote unquote institutes, to put out misinformation. We've seen that happen. Like they've admitted to it throughout the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And so, yeah, it's just I wanted it to be more optimistic. I wanted people to be happier when they listen to it. I wanted to introduce the people that I respect and that I see in this business. And we talk about a variety of things because I publish so much. I know people say I should niche down, but I love just talking about everything. And I get a lot of people who are early career scientists, and I've been very proud of the fact that we talk about, diversity, inclusion, and equity. We've talked about sexual harassment in the workplace because I have a lot of, people in their early 20s who are graduate students or undergraduate students who think that, nobody else is going through this.
Right.
And I had a really brave woman come on to the show and openly talk about what happened. And because of that episode, the people that were funding this person who did this, and ended up like promoting him, not realizing what this person had done, reached out to this person who was on once they heard the episode, and they apologized completely. They had no idea, and they said they're changing their practices in terms of who they fund based on this incident. So, like, yes, this person went through a horrible, horrible incident, but not only did she get the people to change their ways once they figured it out, and which was very nice of them. I mean, it should happen, but it was very nice of them to do that. But she also like reached out to like a state senator, and they put in a law like that to protect graduate students and have better protection for graduate students across the board, not just for science, for any graduate student and undergraduate student. And so like, yes, this person went through this horrible, horrible ordeal. I know it sucks, like, but she felt better because she was able to change it to protect other people that were going to go through that. And it changed an organization's view on how they should fund and who they should fund, and, better background checks, better understanding and listening and that kind of stuff. So I think it was really great. And they weren't really at fault because they didn't know, but now they know and they did something to change it, which I think was really nice to see.
Right. Well, I think that, I mean, that particular incident sounds like so powerful because you gave her a voice,
Right.
of the chance
Right.
to say what happened, and on a podcast, so like out loud anyone
Yeah.
can hear it. And so everyone that heard it, of course we're going through this in the US right now, like, believing women, like this is
Mm-hmm.
real problem in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hear it out loud on
Mm-hmm.
a podcast and just, saying matter of fact what happened, people are going to hear that, and people are either going to hear it and believe it, or they're going to hear it and not believe it. But
Yeah.
the fact is, it's there, and you can't unhear it.
Well, and I think, and so I asked, so when this person approached me to do this, because I would never ask someone to do this because
Yeah.
it's their story, it's their thing. And I'm not a hero in this at all. Like I'm glad to be a part of it. And it was something that was special to me because I helped a friend in a way to get the story out, but it was also helping others because, I'm not someone who goes out and, is a vigilante looking to, make sure everybody's safe. But my goal in life, the legacy that I want to leave just as a human being is just like, I want everybody around me to be happy. I want everybody to be safe, just like I want my kids to be safe and my wife to be safe. That's how I live my life. So if this person's willing to share their story, and they want to share their story because it's not an easy story to share, it made me uncomfortable, at times because of what she went through. it was good to get it out and to show that, the people who are going through it are not alone, because that's what you hear all the time. They think if they hear somebody talking about it, that could have changed. I don't know if it did, but to have it on a platform like this where we're in marine biology, there's been a lot of talk at that point, and it still happens, of sexual harassment in the workplace, especially with students. It's good to have these discussions to make people aware. It's really interesting when you see marine biologists come into the marine biology field. I've worked in the private sector, like non-marine biology and non-science fields. And like I'm working in one right now where it's like fintech and stuff like that. And it's a very different feeling, like when, and maybe it's just me and the passion, but when you have a passion for somebody like marine biologists do, we're stupid enough that we're willing to do it for free. We come out and you say, hey, do you want to come up on a ship? I don't have any funds left, but I can board you in on the ship. I will probably take it. I will probably take vacation to go do that, because that's my passion. I want to do it so badly, and I want to take part in the study. It would be interesting, that kind of stuff. But it would be very rare where you'd see that in fintech. Hey, can you come in for the weekend to work on this report? People would probably be like, no, not really. That may not be the case, but it seems like we have this incessant need to do whatever it takes to be a part of something. And that could put people, especially like people who are very gung-ho about doing something and very naive to what the bad part could happen. And not only from a sexual harassment in the workplace, but also from a safety perspective. You're on a boat. It can be very dangerous. You have to be careful. We tend to be naive of that fact if we're not trained in that fact. And we've seen people have bad accidents. We've seen people harassed. And so it's like, you have to it's a very different field because we're willing to jump in head first without knowing what's underneath.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it was important for me to be like, yes, let's put that episode out if you're comfortable with it. And then, do that. And I had this person listen to it before I published it. I said, are you sure? And then I said, if you ever wanted to, we could just take it down if you don't want it up, and stuff like that. So yeah. So, I mean, we've been able to cover stuff like that. Now, obviously that's a very serious topic, but I found it important. We've also been able to talk about a lot, most of it's like conservation related, what to know, myth busting, proving, like a lot of movies that have come out. You're like, is this real? Is it not? Is this something that we should like Seaspiracy? Way off, like horrible, horrible movie. Shark Whisperer, took that apart. But then you have like Blackfish, which was a great movie and really made a lot of change. Shark Water, great movie because it brought awareness to shark finning. Blackfish brought awareness to orcas in captivity, changed the way SeaWorld and all these other marine themed parks did their work. So like being able to cover that kind of stuff was really great to help people get that understanding. And going back to like me looking for information when I was a kid, I'm able to provide that information for people who want to know. If they're looking for it and they put in the right keywords in the search, or somebody refers them to it, then they can find that information like I was looking for that information. Right. So
Yeah. I mean, I think when you're talking about, I mean, just to go back a little bit, when when the Deepwater Horizon thing happened,
yeah.
and you were like, why don't you know about this? But
Right.
something that keeps coming up for me is, have you talked about it? Like, the people that you're around might not know what you're studying because you're not talking about it. And that's like, let's do that. So, and
It's
that's
a
what we're doing.
huge problem. Less now than it was like 10 years ago or even longer, where scientists didn't talk about what they did. They didn't talk about their science most of the time because people find it boring, because we really get into like, do you want to know the statistical analysis that I did and the results and hear the graphs and all that? And people are like, no. I learned that from my wife really quickly. Like, no, I don't want to listen to this. Just give me give me the two sentence summary and I'll give you a response. But we didn't talk about it publicly because of all the times that journalists and, really nefarious people with nefarious actions and, you look at the fossil fuel industry and they'll take it apart, or journalists at the time would take, and they still do it to this time, they'll take things and they'll manipulate it to make it sound what they want it to sound like and make the scientists look stupid or say something that they didn't want to say or that they didn't say.
Right.
And so a lot of scientists mistrusted the public, but it was this common thing where like, we need to talk about to the public more. I went to two conferences before I started my blogging thing before this whole deep sea. Actually, it was around when Deep Sea Horizon happened. I went to two conferences. I went to one in PEI in Prince Edward Island here in Canada, coastal zone Canada, and I went to CHOW, which is like the what's it called? It's Capitol Hill Oceans Week in the U.S. And it was around the same time. So the CHOW was after. They were both after the Deep Sea Horizon spill. But at both of them, the final say is we need to stop preaching to the choir. Meaning we need to stop talking to scientists and be like, hey, look what we did. This is what we found out. We're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Yeah, climate change sucks, or oil spills are really bad for the environment. It's going to take decades to fix this. But we're saying it to each other because we know it. But we don't say it to yourself. We don't say it to my family. We don't say it to my friends. We don't say it to the public who need to know about this information.
Right.
They're going about everybody's going about our lives, and we get stuck in this too, scientists. So this is where like we're not above everybody. We're in it too. We're in this system that has been designed towards waste, towards using up as many resources as possible. And we all do it. And then just like destroying the environment in the process because we just want to have things conveniently. We want things done quickly. We want to get around things. And we've had a lot of great advancements because of it. However, there's been a lot of stuff that we don't need that we just want to have. Like bottled water in North America. Certain places you need it. Flint,
North
yes.
America that's surrounded by water.
Right. And you have all these lakes.
Yeah.
And we all of a sudden we take bottled water from the same area that we buy in a plastic bottle that make it worse. So there's like these are the types of systems that we're in. Like I use bottled water all the time. Like I would use like my parents would be like, oh, take this water on the way home. It's an hour. Like why do I need bottled water? But there weren't a lot of Yetis. There weren't a lot of these water balls that were easier to come and they look nice and all this kind of stuff. And they keep things cold or hot or whatever you want. And so we're in this kind of system. And so like we need to talk about it more about what these systems are doing to our planet and what it's going to eventually do, which we're really finding out these days, which is just scratching the surface in terms of drought, wildfires, hurricanes, worse hurricanes, more intense storms, storm surges, floods, all these types of things that are happening on a regular basis, and how much money that's costing compared to the money that's going in and we're making, or certain people are making, based on all these conveniences.
Right.
Right. So we're all stuck in this. And I think for me coming out on the podcast and saying, I do it too. And it sucks. I don't want to. I want to make it easier for me, but it's hard to be more environmentally responsible than it is to just act regularly.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like
Takes more
recycling.
thought, more effort. Sure.
Yeah. Recycling was like, okay, cool. They came out. Hey, by the way, if you have all these things like plastic and stuff like that, throw them in this blue bin and we'll recycle them. Awesome. We're going to do that. They came out with programs. They had all this, materials, all this kind of stuff. Then we realized half of it or more than half of it isn't even getting recycled. And whose idea was recycling? Fossil fuels industry.
Right.
Why? Because
they created.
Yeah, 30% of fossil fuel money comes from like the money that they make comes from plastics, creating plastics. So we have this and we think we're doing something good. Then we find out we're not. They're like, oh man, this is really difficult. Then each region comes out. It's like, this is what we can recycle. This is what we can't. And then we find out in North America, we just ship it overseas. There was an article that came out like, I don't know, 8 years ago or so. And it was Ocean Conservancy article. And it was like, oh, 80% of the trash comes from 5 countries and mostly in Asia. And we're like, oh, how come? Like it's bad waste management. Like where's all this stuff coming? We know they have higher populations.
Right.
Why is this happening?
But
like
then we
Bali
find
and
out that we're
like
shipping our trash to.
Then we find out we're shipping it to them
to Asia.
because we can't recycle it and they pay for it. And then all of a sudden China's like, we're not doing this anymore. You have to put it in a certain way for us to take it in a clean way. And then we can actually recycle it. And then we're like, well, we can't do that. So now we have it more. So it's all this stuff makes it difficult to act better and to trust in the systems that act better. And we continue to evolve with technology and convenience and things that make things easier in our lives by like getting drinks. If we're walking, down the street, want to get a drink, go to a convenience store because it's convenient and get a power drink or an energy drink or whatever that's in a plastic bottle or a vitamin water or whatever these waters are now, basically sugar in a bottle. And then we take this plastic thing and we just throw it away. right? And or we go to a here we have Tim Hortons, you have Dunkin' Donuts. We go to Tim Hortons, we get a cup of coffee. Oh well, it's cardboard, like it's coming in a cardboard container. So let's recycle it, but it has a waxy film on it that
Doesn't
doesn't
leave for
allow
a
it to be
reason,
separated. So you can't do that. Oh crap! Like this isn't good for us.
right?
So it's like you try to do something good, and they say, well, it's not working. And you try and just, and then you get the players who, the Ted Cruzes and some of the politicians who are like, oh, well, you're trying to do something, but you're not doing it yourself. You're not living the perfect clean life. Like when protesters went in, or people that testified in Congress saying that we have a plastic problem or we have a fossil fuel problem, this and that, and they're like, well, look at your phone. Your phone is made from petroleum products. Like this is like you are being in the system, and the whole point is, yes, we are in the system.
Hmm.
We are in the we are in the matrix.
We're not
Like we
perfect.
can't.
We're just trying to do better.
We're trying to do better. We're trying, but the thing is, it's the systems that are up top that really drive it, and the people make it like individual change really helps, and it does. But sometimes we're stuck,
Hmm.
and it costs a lot of money and a lot of effort to do something. When you look at a family or someone who's working all the time or working more to make money to survive in this like more and more expensive world that we live in, they don't have the time to go out of their way to do things that are very difficult and very time consuming.
Hmm.
Right? They want to just do it as part of their regular life, and you can't blame it. So changing behavior, they'll put it on us, but then it's really difficult to change behavior when the mechanisms are not there to make it easier for us to change,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? So it makes it difficult in that way. What I try and do is I try and break down those barriers. I try to like, here's the problem, here are the issues that we're facing, and here's some of the solutions, and here are the barriers to those solutions. And it's not our fault necessarily, right? But here are the mechanisms. You can start off with individual actions while doing the same thing and looking at the top down. Who are making the regulations and laws or taking them away that stop us from making the change for a better planet?
Hmm.
And this is not a political post or a political saying you need to, vote one or the other or one party over another. It's look at who you're voting in, who are making the laws or taking away those laws to make a better planet or to make the planet worse.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right?
No,
That's
yeah, and I just say, just think about what we're doing. Think about who you're
yeah.
electing, think about and
Now
just
again,
yeah,
but the problem, sorry to cut you off, but the problem with that is when you vote for the environment, you're told you're voting against the economy. Because the economy is always in some kind of whirlwind. I'm not sure if you've noticed,
I
but
have
it seems like
what?
every about 8 years, the economy is just like terrible.
Yeah.
Whether it's a global pandemic or a recession, because some people are doing some shady things on Wall Street, the economy's always in a problem. And so there's this fight of it's either economy or the environment, and it's difficult to vote for both, and it's difficult for politicians to act for both because they try and separate this,
Hmm.
and that's a problem in itself. It's
Right.
like, why can't we do both?
Yep.
Why can't we vote for both and the government does both? you know so that's another thing. So I'm sorry, I go on these rants, so I apologize for.
No, I was just, when you were talking about the conservation and convenience items and stuff like that, it just reminded
Mhm.
me of an episode of yours that I was listening to the other day about the turtle and the straw. And I was
Oh
like, oh my
yes.
gosh, like you, and I know you were like, it just made this big like uproar. And I was like,
Hmm.
as I was listening to it, and if you guys are not familiar with this, I can't even like it just makes me cry every time. It affected me
Hmm.
so
It's
deeply.
pretty sad.
But straws from drinks, restaurants, whatever, get stuck in the noses, the turtle noses, and it's all bloody, and you have to pull it out, and it's so sad. But that's one of those convenience things that is just oh,
Well, and I think what the interesting thing about that was when that video first went viral, that was the first time we've really seen that.
exactly.
It wasn't a regular occurrence. I interviewed the guy who did it, the guy who pulled the thing, Nathan Robinson. He's a good Dr. Nathan Robinson. He's a very good friend of mine. And Christine Figgener is the one who was taking the video. And and so both of them were doing research in Costa Rica. Nathan was looking at it was actually a really cool study. He's done a number of them since, but looking at the animals that end up living on the shells of the turtles, they call epibionts. So it could be like barnacles, or it could be animals that end up living on the or algae. And what he was doing is he was trying to figure out like where have they gone based on the animals that are on their shell. So like, do they go down to South America because this is a South American barnacle,
Hmm.
or do they go somewhere else? So that was his study. So they were, and then the others were like tagging, and they see this turtle, and they're like, something's wrong with this turtle. It's not doing well. So they lift it up on board. They see something stuck in its nose, and of course the video shows the painful. You can see the turtle was in pain. There's blood. It's hard to watch, so I'm not going to describe it, but you can probably find it anywhere you want. But that really captivated the world. That really did captivate the world, and people were like, straws are the problem. We need to ban plastic straws. And it ignited this movement, which at first we were like, scientists and conservation were like, oh, okay, this is a great opportunity to highlight the plastic pollution problem that's happening worldwide. But everybody was so focused on straws. They're like, if we take out straws, our problems are done. We're going to save the turtles. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And what was interesting is about 4 months later, because I asked in the interview with Nathan, I said, hey, what are the odds of this happening? Like, we haven't heard about this happening. I've never seen it in the literature. I've never heard of it happening. And it could have happened, but I haven't heard. And Nathan was like, he's never seen it. And he
Right.
goes, so let's just say like 1 million or 2 million to one. Like, we don't know. This is just could be
Right.
some random occurrence.
Right.
4 months later, about 70 kilometers south of that beach, another olive ridley turtle was found. It was like a mass like nesting. It's a big like tourist attraction, and he was doing his studies on a different turtle and individual, and somebody came up, one of the turtles came up and said, hey, like this turtle looks like it has something stuck in its nose. So he's like, no, not again. So he runs over there, grabs his like little forceps and stuff, and he pulls it out. And it's not a straw, it's a plastic fork that was folded up in its nose, and it's popped out and it's a fork. And you should see his face. He's like, oh my God. Now that didn't go as viral. You would think that would go to viral. And then you would say it was plastic cutleries in the ocean, not just straws, but plastic cutlery. And I always said this, I said the plastic straw incident was like a gateway drug to
Exactly.
everything else, to understanding all the other plastics. And
Right.
there were certain organizations who really caught on to that, like the Plastic Pollution Coalition and all the people that were within that. But there were so many companies and so many uh, nonprofit organizations that were focusing on banning straws, which, yes, you should. Like, there was no need to have plastic straws unless you needed it for some sort of
Right.
disability that you had. Like, that was a
Right.
thing that came out right away. It was identified right away. And then we saw this change in straws, metal straws, paper straws, all these. Like, there's actually, the innovation has been quite good. A lot of paper straws are like, not many explode, as some people have said, and like spontaneously combust, as some people have said in the past. But people have gotten sick of the plastic straw, the discussion. They're like, who cares about, like, I've had some people like, who cares about sea turtles? I don't care about it. I'm just like, this is
Oh,
not the
don't
point.
say that about the sea turtles.
Well, it backfired,
Yeah. Huh.
and people didn't realize, and like during that time, companies who had come out and said that they, in their values, like their corporate values, have said, we are going to move away from plastic cups. And this, now, like Starbucks said, they were going to, when they first came out, they were very innovative, and they said, we're going to move away from that. And then they eventually like doubled down. Instead of having plastic straws, they had a plastic like cup, and they now have the plastic tops. So you don't need a straw, but they went to plastic tops, which are definitely not recyclable. Like, and so they kind of went, like, they said, hey, we've gotten rid of the plastic straws, but we've got this instead. Probably cheaper and probably easier to make, but harder to recycle. So it just, the whole thing just backfired on conservationists, and
And
it's kind of hard to recover
that's
from that.
so interesting to me because I think that video, that instance lit a fire in me like nothing ever has before.
Hmm.
Like, and then
Hmm.
I remember that soon after that there was a conversation about just single-use plastics in general. And I
Yes.
know that like
Yes.
Maine was the first state in the United States that banned single-use plastics, and
Yep.
COVID happened and everything just went down the toilet. But like
Yeah.
we were making so much progress, and
Hmm.
it was just like, the cutlery. And now I didn't even know this. Like, I just don't eat out, but I don't drink anything. I don't drink anything out except for water, but I
Hmm.
bring my own cup.
Right,
But like,
right.
I don't eat out. And so like, I just found out not too long ago that the plastic cutlery is not even recyclable.
No.
Oof.
Because they're hard to break down. And the interesting thing, I have an interview out with the founder and CEO of TerraCycle, which is a great
Oh,
organization.
cool.
And the thing is, it all comes down to recycling. All comes down to who wants to pay for the materials once it's broken down and
Hmm.
make something out of it, right? So
Right.
TerraCycle is a company who actually works with corporations who make stuff,
Hmm.
and then they fund the research to go into breaking it down and making other stuff. So like when TerraCycle first came out, they made like park benches out of like plastics that
Wrappers.
wouldn't
Yeah.
normally
Yep.
get recycled. So they would break it down and they would do it. But there has to be a market for it. That's the key with recycling. There has to be a market for it. The harder it is to break down like the wax on the paper cups and to separate it, that's more expensive. So it makes the byproduct more expensive.
Yep.
So unless there's like the companies in a buyback program or something like that, it's very hard to do. But you're right. Like when there were two ways the plastic straw kind of campaign went. One was single-use plastics are bad and we should be banning them, and a lot of countries and states and provinces have. And Canada came out in 2021, 2022, around that time, over that time, to ban like six single-use plastic types, including like styrofoam and so forth. And then others just went like, I'm just sick of it. Like the
Right.
overall public sentiment seems to be, and I haven't studied this, but seems to be like, I just don't care anymore. And when you look at the behaviors of people and what they're using and how they're using it, it just comes down to convenience. What is the easiest thing? And when I spoke to Tom Zansky at TerraCycle, he was just like, when we try to do something, we try to make it as easy as possible to do it. Right.
Right.
So if we
Yeah.
want you to send us stuff, we'll send you the labels if you can take it to UPS or FedEx and send it back to us. If that's too much, in certain ways, depending on the area, we might just say, hey, just put it out with your garbage and we will actually do it. Because some people won't even separate. They don't want to do that, right? Because they don't want to change their regular behavior because it takes time and nobody wants to fiddle around and waste.
Right.
It's smelly, it's gross, it's all that kind of stuff, right? So it's a lot of different things, but that campaign itself kind of went like overall kind of went bad.
That's so
Um,
interesting.
yeah.
It just like it sort of polarized people
Yes, it did.
in a way. Like,
And
you're either
politics
like
picked it up and polarized
conservation
it.
or you're like, forget it. It's just, it's not something that we can win, or it just doesn't, it's not that important.
Well, and you kind of saw it with this new administration in the US, right? Like one of the first things President Trump did on
That's
his
something that
first day
I'm
was we are going back to plastic straws. And that was kind of like, what? Like, why do we need to do that? Like, is that something people were suffering from? Like, other than like people who needed it for their disabilities, were we worried about that? Like, was that like that was a big worry? Like, now we're free, like as a society, to be like, we're going back to plastic straws because he was taking away everything else. It just like that became a political thing, just like climate change became a political thing. And it gets dangerous when it becomes divisive like that.
Mhm.
And like certain, sides of the aisle, one way or another, pick it up because plastic pollution and ocean issues is a world problem.
Right. It's not
It's not
political. It's
not left or right. It's a world problem. And we need to tackle it and understand that it's a world problem so that we can better it for ourselves. Like that's the overall goal, is just so we live in a better planet. I think that where it comes, like where it butt heads, is when we're taking away somebody's money.
right.
That's where the problem comes in,
Mhm.
always, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had several conversations on the podcast about, and I think you fall into this very well. So the one of the first ones that I talked to was, his name is Noah Kleiner. He's a climber. Kleiner is a climber.
Love it.
So he has a climbing company in Maine, and it's not just climbing. It's so that when people reach the top, he's like, now look out here, and just, like,
Mm.
just take this in, like find that
Mm-hmm.
awe. And then,
Mm-hmm.
once you have that, like you want to take care of it, preserve it, like, you want to keep it that way. And
Yeah.
so, the conversation that I've had many times is like, find that awe, find that beauty, and like,
Yeah.
find that you want to take care of it. And I think
100%.
that you fall into that really well. Like you are like obsessive about the ocean in a good way, of course.
Hmm.
Like because of that,
I stalk it. I
you're
stalk
going,
you.
you so do. But because of that,
Hmm.
you're working in conservation and taking care of it.
Yeah. Well, it's it's interesting that you mentioned that because there's two things that have really happened over the last like 10 years that have really changed that. And you're right, getting out into nature is the biggest thing. We're trying to connect people back to nature. It's very hard for me to find someone who doesn't like nature, who doesn't like being on a hike, or who doesn't like being in the ocean, or doesn't like being on the ocean. In fact, a legend who unfortunately recently passed, Dr. Wallace J. Nichols, wrote a book called The Blue Mind, and he was a sea turtle biologist, and like he was part of the team, like the first team who put a tracker on a sea turtle,
Oh,
and
wow.
found out that it went from Baja California to Japan. And we didn't know sea turtles traveled that distance before that. So he
Hopefully
was
they
part of
didn't go
that team.
slow on land.
I know, right? But they travel far, and that was one of like the first like studies of long distance travel from a species, an
Oh.
ocean species, and but he also was very uh, focused on how people reacted to conservation.
Mm.
And so he took time instead of studying sea turtles, which what he was known for, he pivoted pretty hard into, and he was one of the people with the Deep Sea Horizon who went down, CNN covered, like used him to cover. Um, and he wrote a book and he teamed up with neuroscientists to be understand why people um, love the ocean so much,
Mm.
and it came out to the color blue, hence the name Blue Mind. And so he had workshops where he held it. He sold the book. It was New York Times bestseller, and it was basically saying when we go away, where do most of us go? We think about going to a beach. Like when you look at a travel magazine, you may
Right.
not have those anymore. This is my age, but we had travel magazines. What was on the cover? It was like a beautiful beach, probably on a
Right.
hotel. Yeah, somebody like man and a woman in their bathing suits looking out into the blue, and it's relaxing. When we look at the ocean, we look at blue as a real relaxing color.
Mm.
You look at LED lights when people want to kind of like chill out. My daughter's blue. That's what they use. And it's just this natural color that kind of relax us. And he wrote a whole book on it on how like the color blue is so important. So how ocean can be important, why it's so important, why we need to protect it and connect to it.
Right.
He would do like 100 days of summer where he would like go out with his daughters and his family and they would just spend in nature and he would like video it and talk about that. He did that year after year after year. In fact, every time I wanted him on my podcast, he was doing one of these 100 days of summer and I was like, I can't get him on the podcast because I keep
Ooh,
looking at the
dang,
wrong one.
busy.
It was kind of like an ongoing joke that we had, but I think it was it's something that like is so important to connect. And I was just watching a video recently, and I don't know how recent it was, but I was watching it the other day, and it was Jane Goodall, like a legend in
Right.
conservation. And they were asking, like, they asked her, like, what's the most important thing people need to do to like understand how good it is to conserve the ocean? And she said, just touch grass. Like that's a common saying now when we want to calm down, just touch grass, get into nature, go hiking, go camping, go to a cottage, a lake house, a summer house if you can, go to the beach, go out to a park where you see greenery and green spaces, be in nature, watch birds, watch, like if you're in your backyard or you have the chance or from your balcony, like watch the animals, how they react and just like enjoy it. And I think a lot of times we are so rushed to get to one place or another to do whatever we need to do, whether it to be to work, whether to visit families, and that, stop, breathe, and touch grass or touch water. Like that's really what it comes down to is just you're seeing a lot more conservation programs that are taking people out to the ocean for
Mhm.
diving excursions, snorkeling excursions, things because we're just trying to connect people back to the ocean. That's like the first step to being like, because you never know what you're going to see,
Mhm.
especially in the ocean. You could be diving, you could, a little shark comes by or a big shark comes by, and you're like, I didn't get eaten. That's cool. Like I was here. Like this is really cool. Like I had this experience. Or, you go to South Africa and all of a sudden you're in this one area and it's like South African penguins are everywhere. Like this is awesome. There's a lot of things that we can do to view things and understand nature, that will really reconnect us and be like, you know what? Like, I would like to see this. Like, if I'm at a park and then all of a sudden the government's like, well, we're going to put a highway through it. I don't want that. I want my park. So I think like connecting to nature is probably the biggest thing, the first steps, I would say, to getting back into conservation.
Agree.
Yeah.
And I just on you've said the word, well, we've said the word several times, but I wrote down because when I was listening to your podcast, another one of your episodes, and I couldn't tell you which one because they're new lately,
I
but
probably couldn't tell you which one
you
either.
had said, well, you might remember now, but you had said just this little phrase. You said conservation is collaboration,
Mm,
and I was like, dude, that's so good.
yeah. And you know what? It needs to be said more,
Yep.
and people need to understand it more. And the reason why that was such a big episode, and I wanted to do that episode, that was with the Balian Foundation.
Aha.
Um, I
I
know that
remember.
episode. Yeah. And the reason, because we talked about it before, we had a whole meeting on it before we did the podcast, because even within the field of marine conservation, there is this fighting, because there's fighting for funding, there's fighting for trademarks, there's
What's
fighting
more
for
important?
who's
Who's
going to get the science out first, stealing ideas. There's all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And we talk about it all the time as a field, to be like, we need to collaborate more. But when it really comes down to it, people are willing to step over each other to get the glory. Their organization is the one that did this. Their organization is the one that did that.
Right.
And to be honest, it's one of the reasons why I've kind of like this podcast has kind of stayed independent, because
Mhm.
people have asked, why don't you just go to an organization and just be like, hey, why don't we just take this podcast, pay me a full-time salary, and we can do this. And I would do it. Like, I would have done it in the past. I would be like, yeah, let's do this. Like, I could, go. I
Right.
used to like sell that kind of service to
Yep.
organizations, and they never really bought it. For some reason, podcasting is not in their thing. I don't know why. I disagree, but whatever. I'm biased.
Right.
But like, it's this collaboration thing that we need to do more. That's what makes it better.
Yeah.
Governments collaborating, you get, because like species and oceans, they don't see borders. You know,
Right.
you need to collaborate. You need to collaborate as people. We need to
Right.
understand where people are coming from and where they're going, and how they live. And one of the funniest things, when I first started podcasting, I went to a conference, and I used to present on podcasting, and I said, more people need to get into podcasting. We need to talk about science more. We need to talk about conservation. And I remember I had a very good friend of mine lift up her hand, and she was like, why are you telling people the podcast? Like, don't you want to kind of own, like, you're doing so well? Like, why? Because it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the audience member who will connect with certain people.
Mhm.
There are people who will connect with me and they love the podcast, and I'm super happy about that. There are other people who just may not like my voice, may not like the way I approach doing things, may not like the way I cover stuff, or they may want to hear something else, or from someone else. They
Mhm.
may be a different culture, so we don't connect that way, and that's fine.
Right.
The big thing is like, what's best for the ocean. That's how we need to think about it. And we need more people from different places to talk about their experiences with the ocean, because they'll connect with other people who have had the same experience or has similar experience, and
Right.
then we'll connect with them. We need everybody on board
Right.
to conserve the ocean. It's not about me being like, I am taking over everything.
I am the ocean
Right.
guy.
Yeah, it's
I
not
am the
that.
only one.
Yeah, it's not about that. And I've tried to keep it as much as possible that way,
Mhm.
and I feel like I've done a good job in that way. I've helped launch a number of different podcasts for people, who have, whether they've continued on or not, because of their busy lives and so forth. I'm working on building out a network and getting more organizations and more people involved to doing that, because we need to talk about it more.
Mhm.
And different people need to talk about it more, from
Right.
different cultures and different backgrounds and even different professions. Like, business people should talk about it more.
Right.
Divers, snorkelers, surfers, they all need to talk about it more. And they do, but not necessarily in the podcast format. I've seen now a little bit more of a surge of that, and I'm happy to see it, but we need to see more and more people continue that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
to back up to the collaboration part, like even, I know you're talking about all the different areas of ocean, but when I heard you say that, I went to, oh, heck yes. Like, it's not like, because I'm thinking of, like the World Wildlife Fund and
Yep.
save the parks or whatever. And
Yep.
the ocean, like it's not like ocean is more important than wildlife
For sure.
or saving public
For
lands
sure.
or whatever. It's like it's all important. We're
Yes. And it's all connected.
collaborating. Yes.
All
It's
connected.
not like you can say
Yeah.
we're going to go all in on the ocean and let the rest go.
Right.
Like that's not
Yeah.
it's not really an option.
No. No.
And it's not
And
really that's not even a conversation. Like we need to just collaborate and like let's take care of the earth period.
well, and the interesting thing is that that's been a problem in the
It
past, where
has.
you have, scientists and conservationists who are so focused on the ocean that sometimes it's just barriers in terms of like silos where they don't talk to people who are in like wildlife or land conservation. And there are like when it comes to the coastal conservation, that's why coastal conservation has been so hard. It takes both, but there's different there's different ways of doing it. Like, when you look at oceans, there's a third dimension in there. There's the water column, which is important.
What is a water
In
column?
Well, like, so you got the surface of the water, you got the bottom of the water,
So
but
the
then you got
middle.
everything in between,
Okay.
right? So that's the water
Right.
column. With other than birds on land, you basically have the land, maybe the trees, at the height of the trees, and with birds you have the sky. So you have like if you
Right.
want to call it the sky column or the atmosphere. But that's not always like when you protect a park, you just have to protect the boundaries. You're not necessarily protecting, planes can still fly by. You know what I mean? But like when you're protecting a marine protected area, like an ocean protected area, there are people who are fishing in the water in the column. So you're not just protecting the bottom or the surface, you're protecting what's in the middle because fish are in the middle and invertebrates and so forth. So there's different processes. So when they come together, they don't necessarily have the agreements on which way is the best. You're getting it better. It's getting better. It's gotten better over the years, but they just never talked because it was different, and so and there's rivalries, just like
Of
teams,
course.
there's rivalries and stuff
Of
like
course.
that and companies, and that happens, and that's we're all human and stuff like that. But it is getting better because now we know the coast is what people see. I was part of a process for the Great Lakes. It was like the near shore agreement, and it was like a bilateral, so like U.S. Canada kind of agreement. And one of the biggest things, like we're like, what are we trying to protect here? Like we're trying to protect the coast, but how far up the coast? How far out the coast? Like what are we trying to protect?
Right.
And somebody put it in really plain, simple terms. Like they asked the people and citizens, and they're like,
As far
I
as
just don't want to look out into the Great Lakes and see green, or I don't want it to smell. And
oh,
it's like, fair enough. Okay. So like, cause that's like, people are not necessarily, like, I want to see a biodiverse,
right.
coastline. Cause they don't necessarily know what that means. They can't see under the water most of the time, right? Cause they're not going under the water. They're not looking for water. They probably don't even want to know what's under the water. But that's what's important to us as scientists because we know the processes that'll make sure everything's safe. But they don't want to see green. They don't want to see.
That's
So
all
that
they
makes
care
it a
about.
little easier for us to manage, being like, all right, let's make sure water quality is good. Let's make sure like nothing's going into the water. Like, it's a little easier to manage. But there's also a lot of other things that can go. But that's the start. Like, what do people want? And asking what people want. That's why the communication is so important,
Hmm.
with podcasting and getting feedback and
Right.
so forth and answering questions.
Yes. Yes. So I love being able to talk about stuff like this with somebody. And I know I do it every week, but like it's just I feel like we're sort of on the same wavelength. I'm not a scientist by any means, but like I totally get. And I think that I had told you when we first talked, I was like, I am terrified of the ocean. And I feel as I've been thinking about it, I'm like, I should
hmm
probably word that differently. Like I have a very healthy respect
hmm
for the
Hey,
ocean
I get it. I
in
get
that I
it.
don't want anything to touch me. But like
Yeah.
but I have a very deep respect for the
hmm
power of everything around it and
hmm
how important it is.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be in it. Like I don't want
Well,
to.
I think what's interesting too is a lot of people say that, and that can be like, I see your point. You respect it. You want to see stuff in it. You just don't want it to touch you.
Yep.
That's understandable. I think what the where it gets tricky is when people want to go in the ocean, but they don't want. They're like, oh, there's so much seaweed, there's so much algae, it's touching me. I don't want to see it. And when you go to a resort or a hotel, that resort's like, well, I want people to go into the ocean because that's why they're coming here. If not, they're just going to a
Right. So we're
pool.
gonna
They can go
clean that up.
anywhere. So we're going to just take out all the plants and because it's seaweed or algae, and we don't want to do that. You know,
Nifty.
quick story. I know I talk a lot, but quick story. We were out in Mexico, and it was family, my wife's side of the family, and it was my kids, my nephews, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my in-laws, and my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law don't really go in the ocean. My sister-in-law has a very similar fear to you and to a lot of people where she doesn't want to touch anything in the ocean. Fair enough. I asked her, my nephews were pretty young at that point, and they were starting to get the same fear because, you fear what your parents fear. And I said, hey, do you mind if, there's a lot of stuff out here. There's probably a lot of fish out here, and I kind of know where to go. Do you mind if we just grab our snorkel gear and it's very shallow and it wasn't rough. I go, do you mind if I just take one out, one at a time, taking some places, and maybe we can see some fish? They understand my incessant need to, be
Yeah.
underwater and stuff like that. So they're like, yeah, no problem. We went out
Those
and we
kids
saw
have the best
so
time.
much stuff. Like there was like a pier, like a small pier, and we went and there's like seagrass that was like yay high. And I go, just hold on to my arm and I'm just gonna part this. And the little puffer fish like popped out, blue eyes looking at, they were like, holy cow, this is awesome. And then there's like these little, pipe fish and stuff like, and I'm like, this is what happened. There's little crabs that are all over the place. I'm like, and I asked them after, I said, what'd you think? Like, that was amazing. I'm like, were you ever scared? Like, we were scared at first, but then we saw the fish and it was really cool. I'm like, yeah. I said, this is what's in this quote unquote seaweed, that everybody is afraid to touch. These are where the fish hide, these are where they feed. This is an important part. So it's like a teaching moment for them, but also like an experience moment that they're just like, this is amazing. So every time we go away, if we go somewhere tropical, we'll go and explore and we'll be
Right.
like, let's find some stuff. And it's been quite the experience to be able to show them that.
For sure. I'm
Yeah.
very sure. That's awesome. I'm glad that they have you to help them explore. And I'm glad I don't have kids that would just be missing out on life.
Well, maybe one time you'll like, I find there's times where I'll go into places. I'm like, oh, should I go in here? And then my kids are like, let's go, let's go. And then I'm like, okay, let's do this. We can do this.
I will wade if I
you know, yeah, waiting's great.
ankle
Waiting's
deep.
great.
That's it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fine.
yeah. So this is really amazing, and I love. And so you actually you have your like overhead business. Is it the Speak Up for Blue? Is it like an overhead of your?
Yeah, so I did make a business out of Speak Up for Blue Media and Communications. I'm building out a podcast network. Right now it's got two shows. So it's got the How to Protect the Ocean podcast, which is 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And then we've got the Beyond Jaws podcast, which I co-host with a friend of mine and a colleague, Dr. David Ebert, who's known as the lost shark guy. He's actually out in Africa right now searching for lost sharks. He's described and named over 50 species of sharks, and mentored students for about 35, 40 years. Great guy, and we have a lot of fun. And that podcast is a little bit different than How to Protect the Ocean. How to Protect the Ocean is more conservation focused. The Beyond Jaws podcast is speaking with shark scientists and conservationists and really almost documenting their career path. A lot of people are like, I want to go into shark conservation. I want to study sharks. Like, well, how do you want to do it? And here's how you do it. And understand that it's not a straight and narrow
Right.
path. It meanders a lot. And some of the greats that we've been able to have, some of the legends, including Dave on the podcast, talking about how they've gone in and out of, shark science, sometimes in fisheries, sometimes in a completely different business just to make money, to survive, and then coming back and having that path. It makes a lot of the people who are listening understand, like, okay, not everybody's going to be able to do this, no problem. It could be a tough field, but understand that everybody's gone through that. And I think that helps. So I'm trying to build out that network, working on something related to fisheries right now. I don't know if it'll be a separate podcast or part of How to Protect the Ocean to maybe launch it. Also looking at a seagrass podcast. And this is where, we talk about the communication aspect. Sometimes we're doing it. There's always the communication with the public to understand coral reefs, seagrasses, and so forth. But also there's a silo with different researchers who may be in different geographic regions studying very similar things, but they don't know about other scientists. So it's a way to connect within the science and conservation of, like, say, a topic like seagrasses and,
Ooh, that's
networking.
fun.
So by interviewing individuals from all over the world, you're connecting other people who are in seagrasses. So they're not only just getting the information from journal articles, where some people are able to get, that's a whole other podcast that we can do, but it costs like $10,000 for a subscription. Not a lot of people can afford that. And
Okay.
so they don't. So they don't hear about these different types of papers that come out. And so this allows that information to get out a lot easier to areas that may not be able to afford a license or a subscription to some of these journal articles, one, let alone, 10 that get published all over the place on seagrasses. So there's that connection to the public, but also that networking and connection within the field of a specific topic. So we're trying to build that out. I'm actively looking and talking to companies to sponsor either a podcast or the network itself as part of, like, being a partner, to be like, we need to build ocean literacy to a point where people can get information easily. And there's so many different topics that we can have a number of different shows and monetize a little bit. So it's not just me doing the work, and we can get other hosts, we can
Yeah.
get other voices, and it'll be a lot of fun. They can actually get paid to do it, and then just go. I do this all volunteer. This is what I do as a passion project, but I would like to do this full time at some point. And so that's like my first step to getting to that point.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah,
I mean, that whole networking part sounds really important. I mean, there are so many people in different parts of the world, like you were saying, that do something similar, but the seagrass, or, the whatever they're studying is different than what someone else might be studying. And
absolutely.
if they're like, oh, you have someone as a guest on a podcast, and so then they're like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I'll listen to this, and then they hear about someone else, and they're like, I didn't even
Yeah.
know about that. And then they
Yeah.
connect, and you're like a matchmaker for.
In a way, that's what it takes. I've been able, in my own experience, I've been able to connect with people all over the world. Like, this podcast has been listened to in over 150 countries. It's insane. And that's an important part of it. And so, like, you just never know who's listening, and, like, the opportunities that come out of it, you never know. I hosted the Toronto Zoo podcast for about 2 years, and that was a lot of fun. But I got a producer, a TV show producer, was listening to it and approached me about being on a TV show, to do that kind of. You just, from a content creator perspective, you never know who's listening, and you never know what can be. So you may not get money from, like, YouTube or from, like, your own. Every time you put out content, you get money, or even like a sponsor, but you might get an opportunity for. I've had job offers, I've had all sorts of things. You just never know what you're going to do, and that's why I've kind of made it a company, because you just never know
Right.
how it's going to come, right? How these opportunities are going to approach you and how it's going to come. So, for those of you who are, like, on the fence of doing something in content creation, whether it's a podcast or a video or whatever, just do it, because you never know who's going to listen, and you don't need a lot of listeners for that to happen. So that's something I've learned.
A topic that's hits the bone.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
My goodness. So this has been so fun. Twice. But so Andrew, tell us how we can find you.
Yeah. So if you go to speakupforblue.com, that's like the home on the web for the podcast network in itself. So you'll see Beyond Jaws, you'll see How to Protect the Ocean. There's a couple of other podcasts out there. Fancy Scientists, it's more wildlife based. There's a vet one that's, for some reason, I'm losing what it's called, I don't know why. But
You'll
anyway,
find it on the website if you
you'll
go.
find it on the website. Yeah. And so there's a number of other ways. It's a vet, like, if somebody wanted to be a vet student, want to be a marine vet. So she talked to a lot of different marine vets and how they work and all this kind of stuff and what they work on. So that's a really cool one as well. So there's a lot of stuff that's on there. It'll continue to build as we grow shows. But listen to How to Protect the Ocean, Beyond Jaws,
Plenty of
whatever you
things.
interests you. Yeah. Whatever interests you in science.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and so 1,800 episodes.
1,800 episodes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot. This is the first time I've actually had a voice problem all summer, where I've had to like rest my voice. Like my doctor's like, "Do you sing?" I say, "No, but I talk a lot."
All the
And
time.
it's like affecting my voice now where I'm starting to drink tea more often. I'm starting to like, like rest my voice a lot more. I can't do as many episodes like throughout the week. I have to almost batch record them all. And um
On a good voice day.
not a good, yeah, it just depends on the day. So I have to learn to rest a little bit. But I get, you can see I get super passionate about it. It's something that's important to me because it's important to everybody, and I like to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, and thank you so much for that. So I mean, what does the word sustainability mean to you? Clearly, you care a lot about
Hmm.
everything, ocean.
Yeah, everything planet wise. I've really started to get my daughter's interested in land animals and land conservation. And so that's gotten me more into that as well as I grow. And you realize the connection. But sustainability just means like, for me, it's like, how can we live on this planet without destroying the planet? So even just daily life, how can you live like all the decisions you make throughout the day? I ask myself, am I living for me? I ask, am I living for a better ocean? Now I live in Ontario. I am not near an ocean,
Ocean.
but if I throw something on the ground and it ends up in a river, that'll end up in the Great Lakes. That'll end up in the St. Lawrence River. That'll end up in the ocean. It's all
Right,
connected,
right.
right? And so I have to daily I ask myself, everything I do, is this better for the ocean? So I ate at Subway the other day. They actually come out the containers. I don't know if it's in the States, but in Canada, they have like cardboard containers now, takeout containers. I had like a rice bowl.
Oh, I
And
was
so
gonna say
that
sandwiches.
is, yeah, that is better than recycling. They used to use plastic and now they use this. So I'm like, I'm okay to eat that because of that. Now, I'm not asking like the food waste and all that kind of stuff. That's a very different question.
Right.
But I look at that and it's not plastic. It's not like there's other takeout. There's like a Chinese place, like a Chinese restaurant right by the place. Their takeout containers plastics. They give plastic forks all the time. Like I won't eat there because I know this one will do something better. So everything I do, I ask if it's sustainable. And sometimes if I'm like, oh, this is not, but I need it right now, you kind of have to go into it because you fall within the system. But then you ask like, how can I better prepare myself next time to avoid using something like that? So the sustainability is just like, can I live my life without affecting the planet in a negative way?
Mm.
Sometimes, some days you can, some days you can't, and sometimes you can do more than others. The more you think about it, the more you start looking for options, and to be honest, I've been kind of using AI to help, with my options. Because I'll look at it and I'll be like, all right, so I just had this, whatever the item was. What's a more like a better alternative? And it'll give me ideas. And I'll be like, is this easy to get? Is it hard to get? Like, and then I kind of dive into it. I'm like, oh, maybe I can do an episode on this. But you look at you start looking at answers, ask Siri, ask Gemini, whatever it is, and just be like, what's the alternative to this? Like, be curious. Like how can I make this planet better
Hmm.
individually? And then
Right,
what can I do on a larger scale, speaking to your government representative? Because that's
right,
probably the biggest thing you can do.
right. Well, and I mean, like you said before, we're not perfect people.
Nope.
We're just doing the best that we can. And if you have a craving and you want to eat something that's maybe not good or whatever, you just think about,
Hmm.
what we can do better next time or offset it or something. Like we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And so
Nobody's perfect.
just doing
Yeah.
the best that we can. And it's also, I mean, you were just pointing out, vote with your dollars.
Yep. Absolutely. Vote your dollars. And then also, we all were based on a life of convenience. Slow down. Slow down. You don't need to drive everywhere. You don't need to rush everywhere. Take a day. If you have a lawn or you have like a backyard, sit out in the backyard, not in a chair, just sit on the ground and just observe. Like slow down a little bit. I've learned to do that over the last little bit.
It
COVID
happens at
actually
our
made
age, I
us,
think.
yeah, but also COVID made like as a
Yep.
family we slow down. We're doing
Yep.
less dinners and it's just kind
Yep.
of, and I think it also, yeah, you're right. Age is kind of the same thing, but you just enjoy life. A lot of times, like I'm very privileged to have a nice backyard, big backyard. I just sit out there and I just chill. My dogs are running around playing, and just observing stuff,
Yep.
like the birds and stuff like that. We get blue jays and cardinals, and they're beautiful birds, and you get to watch them and listen to them and feel the grass, touch grass.
Yep.
That's what you can do.
I know
So
my new thing is lately I will let my chickens out from
yeah,
7 p.m. till 8 p.m. until like it's starting to get dark before
yeah,
8 p.m. But like then I'm there. I'm right there. Like
yeah,
I am on the deck right there
yeah,
watching everything so that they're not taken or whatever. But like
yeah,
that is our hour. We're all outside.
yeah,
And
just chilling.
the cats are on their leashes and the dog is beside me. We're all outside together.
Yeah,
And I took a video, I took a picture, like there's a doe that comes into my yard and she was like right in front of me on the deck and she was cleaning up underneath the bird feeder. But she was there for like 20 minutes.
that's
Like the
awesome.
dog and the cats and the chickens were all hanging out and I'm like, this is the most amazing thing. And then
You're
the hummingbirds were just crazy. Like I'm like,
like
I
the
don't know if
scene
it's
from
my age.
Bambi.
I know. I'm like, I don't know if it's because it's in my 50s, but I'm like, what? This is like magical, this moment right here.
Hmm.
But I'm all
It's
for that. I
beautiful.
think that's,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
necessary. I think we all need it. And it helps, like, not only it helps us connect to the planet, it helps our brain, it helps us relax. We have a lot of information coming at us these days. Some of it heavier than others. Everybody's going through their own thing. It's really difficult to process at times, and nature helps.
Mhm.
It's proven fact. That's a scientific fact that nature helps, us relax, helps our body relax, and I think it's important. So making sure you reconnect with nature is always a good thing.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
Uh, and so you said speakupforblue.com
Yeah.
and everything is there.
Yeah.
And you're definitely on Instagram. I've seen you there.
Yep. So it's how to protect the ocean on Instagram. It's Speak Up for Blue on TikTok, um, and Andrew Lewin on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, feel free to message me on any of those platforms. You can also go to speakupforblue.com/contact. It goes right to my email if you fill out the form. So there's so many ways to get a hold of me. Always, ready to have a conversation, and it's always fun.
Especially about the ocean.
Oh, absolutely.
You can talk all day long.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For
That's
sure.
awesome. Andrew Lewin, thank you so much for this. This is like, it's so enlightening. It's so fun. It's so interesting. Like, I never thought that talking to a scientist would be so fun. And not because scientists are super geeky, but like my eyes sort of roll back in my head because I'm
Yeah.
not that person. But like, just the way that you talk and just how passionate you are about it is just like, I can't not love that.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. It's all about connecting with what people like. It's knowing your audience, and I'll stay away from the statistics at the beginning, and then I'll eventually get there.
And you guys, if you're when you're listening, you can totally reach out to him because I before we started
Oh
recording,
yeah.
I was like, I was listening to your episode today, and what the heck is that about shark meat? Like I didn't
Yeah.
really catch that, and so he was filling me in. So Phil
Yeah.
he will talk to you about it if you reach out.
Yeah. No, and sometimes it gives me good ideas for content later on. So ask your questions, always willing to talk, seeing what people really want to hear. That always helps me too, right? All the questions they have.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy.